Welcome to Magnificent Living Today. Are you living a life of optimal health? Do you want to make changes in your life? Do you need help setting and achieving goals? Are you ready to reform and reshape your mind, body, and spirit? Are you looking for more balance in your life? Many of us are thinking about starting a better lifestyle program, both for ourselves and or our family. We all know how difficult it can be to motivate others when we ourselves are not motivated. Sometimes we all need a little help reaching our goals, and that's why Magnificent Living Today is here for you.
Welcome to Magnificent Living Today. Today I'm joined by Alexis Scott. Welcome, Alexis.
Thank you, Carl.
And we're going to be talking about New Year's resolutions and why they don't work. And we're going to continue throughout the holiday seasons talking about goal setting and why goal setting is a much better option. We're going to take a little break right here, and we're going to come right back with Alexis, and we're going to start with a subject called Mind Stuff.
Getting back into the flow. Faith, love, optimism, wisdom. Some people go through life and other people flow through life. Which one do you choose? Living in the path of flow is an everyday choice. We must constantly challenge our mind, body, and spirit to be in unison. How do you plan to flow through your life this week, this month, this year?
Welcome back to Magnificent Living Today. Again, I'm joined with Alexis Scott. And we're going to start with a segment called Mind Stuff, where we're just going to read from our Louise Hay cards. And we'll talk about what they mean to us and how they've affected, how these thoughts have affected our lives and our psyche. So I'll let you start.
Excellent. Okay, the affirmation I have is, I am willing to learn something new every day, which is, it's the way I am anyway. But to see that written down is kind of like, it gives you the energy of wanting to be open and receptive to something more than what you already know. So yes, I do this all the time. Matter of fact, I'm learning something new all the time because it's important for the expansion of your mind, to use more of your brain.
And for me, I've always worked on the theory that if there's something that I don't know, I then really get involved in trying to find out what is it about that particular thing. If it's doing a television show, if it's doing video editing, I start off with the very basics of things, and then I always say, I know I can always get better at this.
Exactly.
And just knowing that I can get better at things makes me constantly want to learn, because I always want to be better.
And I think that when you open yourself to learn, you become the eternal student. That's what people call me. She's always learning. I always have books. I always have something that I want to know. I need to understand. On several levels.
Well, in this world, there's just so much to learn. I always think that if I could just, like the computer, they always say you use maybe a quarter of your computer's capacity. I think with our brain and our lives, the same thing. We only get a quarter of the capacity. So I'm always trying to push further into that capacity of what I can learn, how I can make myself a better person, and how I can improve the things for the people around me. Because when I learn more things, I can teach more things. And I am the consummate teacher. I always want to learn how to teach more effectively. And that's what I love about teaching health and fitness classes, is in the 30 years, the evolution of how I've been able to relay that message to people, and realizing that people learn different ways. And so I've got to learn 10 different ways to teach something, because there might be 10 different people in the class, and I've got to, some people are auditory learners, some people are visual learners, some people learn when you speak heart words, some people learn when you speak harsh words, and you just have to kind of find that balance. But for me, that's been part of the learning curve, is learning how to teach.
I couldn't say that more eloquently myself. I'm the exact same way. And the reason that I love that so much is because that's what I love to do. I like to constantly improve on myself. And then I like to help other people find that awareness, cultivate that awareness. That's even my tagline for Real Food for the Soul, is cultivating an awareness for balanced living. So when you cultivate the awareness in another person, like you said, however they choose, however they learn, if you're able to tap into that, that's something new for them.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I didn't know I had that in me. You know,
Right.
thank you for that. You know, so it opens up other doors in people so that they can live life more fully.
Yeah, and helping people live life more authentically is always my
Exactly.
goal. Okay, my affirmation is, I choose to believe that it is easy to change a thought or a pattern.
That's a biggie. 'Cause that's what we're going to talk about later.
Yeah,
you
because
know.
that's really what that whole goal setting resolution is about, is learning how to effectively make change. And it starts with the thought, because before I can change anything exterior, I've got to change my thought around it first. If I want to quit smoking, I have to first decide that I'm done smoking. Because a lot of people say, oh, for my New Year's resolution, I'm going to go back to this, I am going to quit smoking. But they haven't mentally let go of all of the reasons why they believe they need to smoke. And until you find the truth, the essence of why you really smoke, then it's not going to change.
And then you have to find the way to interrupt the pattern. That's the key, is to do what you said, find out what that truth is, and then interrupt the pattern. How do you go about interrupting the pattern? A pattern's a habit, you know, or a habit is a pattern.
Right, exactly.
You know, and so given that, how do you begin to access the interruption of that pattern? What do you need to do to activate?
I think you have to, like I said, I think become clear. When I was in my 20s, I smoked, and I worked in an office.
I can't even imagine you smoking
I
a
was
cigarette.
completely unhappy with what I was doing. And for me, the smoking was a procrastination tool, because every time I said, I'll get to this next thing that I didn't really want to do, I'll have a cigarette first. And so I could always procrastinate by having that cigarette. And for me, when I realized that it was more about procrastination, and what that meant was I was wasting time, the first thing I did was stop smoking. And then after I stopped smoking, I realized that I needed to find a new job. And for me, that was a no-brainer, because I literally would sit at my desk and cry and not understand, you know, the job paid money. I liked the people at work. The people at work liked me, but the second I had to sit down and actually do the work, my eyes would water. And it was all about, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing.
Your spirit was letting you know.
So I had to change more than one pattern. I had to first change the pattern of smoking, but realizing that if I really wanted to be consistent and end that whole smoking thing, I had to change the source. And changing the source meant I had to find a new occupation. And it was, I didn't know that going into it. I didn't know it that day. Probably 10 years later, I sat down and said, oh, that's what it was. But yeah, but I had to change my thought before I changed the pattern.
Yep. I've been in jobs like that where I was absolutely miserable. Sometimes my stomach would even hurt. I didn't know at that time that that's literally energy leaving your body. When it's like, you know how you say you have a gut reaction to something and you're digesting the process of what's going on. And I relate that when I'm talking to clients that have digestive issues. I always tell them to look at what's not processing in your life. What are you not digesting in your life? You know what I mean? What's getting caught up? And so when I went through that shift that you're talking about several times in my work life, it was time to change. And it became very easy once I identified it. It became very easy, and it's the same thing. I loved who I worked with, I loved where I worked, but I didn't like what I was doing. It was like I was just bored to tears. It didn't challenge me enough, and it didn't bring out the creative and artistic sides.
And one of the things I urge people when I do goal setting with them, when they come to me and say they want to start a New Year's resolution, I say, hold on, let's go back and let's just call it goal setting and let's make a plan. But when they start to make their plan, I make them start to write down lists. And that's what most people don't do. They're not willing to write down lists. And these days, with the cell phone and the computer, most people don't write at all. And it's amazing when you finally sit somebody down and you say, okay, let's sit down and start writing these things. And they're like, well, can I use my laptop? But there's something about actually sitting there with your hand, pen in hand, and writing down.
I agree.
That really makes you realize when you're typing it, somehow there's distance between you, the words, and your thought. And somehow when you write it with your hand, it just feels a whole lot different. But I just think that you have to really become clear when you say, okay, I'm going to start with my resolution plan, my goal plan for the next year. Start looking at all of the things that need to change, because there might be one goal that you're trying to achieve, but in order to get to that one goal, 10 other things might need to change.
Exactly.
So that's why I love that whole writing it down. That's why I think writing it down is so important.
I think writing, period, is important. How do you feel when someone takes the time to send you an actual card in the mail? Is that more heartwarming to you than an email?
I only have one friend who always birthday cards, Christmas cards.
I love that.
You know,
I think that's
little message inside, but it's really become a lost form, a lost art form.
I love that. It means that the person took time to sit down and find you the card. So, you know, it's time consuming, but I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's a little bit of tradition that I actually support. So my next card, do you want me to go into mine?
Yeah.
My next card is, I cannot learn other people's lessons for them. They must do the work themselves, and they will do it when they are ready. I learned this lesson in a big way when I got married. I've always been kind of on a spiritual path, at least maybe the last 20, 25 years. And so I could see, you know how you can see the potential in someone, but you really, really cannot force them to do anything that they're not ready to do. And I really wanted my husband to get into yoga and, you know, get into my world a bit. And it doesn't work. Or if they do it, they're not coming from their authentic self. It may be that they're trying to appease you. So even though it's challenging, especially with a child, you know, or an elder or someone that you're trying to help, and if they can't see it, especially if they don't believe it, then it's very challenging to get them to do the work that they're not ready for.
And you can't go in and judge their path.
Exactly.
Because I don't ever really think I'm going to understand completely the road that you've been on.
Exactly.
We can sit down and we can talk about it. You can articulate it to me perfectly. But I didn't walk in your shoes while you were walking down the road. And until I realized that I have to detach myself from, well, she really should be doing this. She would feel a lot better if she did this. I can talk to you about it. I can wish and pray and hope for you. But until you yourself are ready to make that change, I'm out of it. I'm really out of the equation. All I really can do is be an outsider. And
be supportive when you...
Yeah. I have clients who come to me, and I have one particular client who has come to me with the same problem for the last 5 years. And she's become what I call an ask hole. She asks, and then she never takes your suggestion. You know, she'll say, this has happened, and da-da-da-da-da, and you sit there and you tell her, okay, what you should probably do in this situation is go inside, think about what you need to do, and she'll sit there and she'll shake her head, yes, that's what I need to do, and then 3 months later, she comes back with the same exact issue, and you think, okay, did you try this? And well, no, and then all of the reasons why I didn't try what you suggested. But let me ask you one more time. And I was going through my paces with it because I would give the advice, and then it would come back and it would be the same problem. And I'd be slightly frustrated. Then I'd give the advice, 6 months later, same problem. I was more aggravated. And finally, after about 2 years of going back and forth and back and forth and letting it kind of get into my emotions and my psyche, I just realized that I have to distance myself and just and give the same answer. And if you can't hear me loudly and clearly, like I talked about learning how to teach things 10 different ways, I found 10 different ways to say it to you, and none of them are working. So you know what I do? I'll go back to point one. I'll go back to the first way. And if maybe I'll never be able to help you with that. And that's the other thing is sometimes you can't help another person. So, you know, you have to just kind of say, God, that's yours now because I've done what I can do.
I've also learned to not take it personally. You know, to step back from it, like you said, and disconnect and know that I surrender. You know, this is your journey and this is what you need to do. Learn from yourself learn to tune into yourself to know what steps to take next, because there are always people that, you know, that my clients, some want you to set up meal plans and so forth. I'm not a dietitian. Do you understand? There's a difference between the two of us, but at the same time, when you take on the actual responsibility of really wanting to get something done and your intention is there, you'll do what you need to do the work and you'll get the results.
Yeah, and
It's just that simple.
You can't go shopping for them. You can't cook for them. You know, you can't sit down and eat with them every day. And so you just, especially with the most difficult of clients, you have to give them the guidance and give them permission to fail. Because sometimes permission to fail is okay. You know, it's to say, you know what, you may not be perfect at this at first. This may not work immediately. But after a couple of years, you do have to kind of cut it and say, you know what,
You do.
this is yours, and I can't do
And not
anything.
taking it personal. That's why the permission piece is important, because I teach people how to give themselves permission to interrupt that pattern. If you keep doing the same thing, you're always going to get what you've gotten. So give yourself permission. It's okay for you to change this.
And it's okay for it to be scary, because it's going to be scary.
It's
going to be
definitely going
different.
to be scary. It'll be different from what you know.
Right.
You know?
All right, we're going to take a little break right here, and when we come back, we're going to continue with our cards. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with you.
The future hasn't happened yet, and the past is gone. So I think the only moment we have is right here and now. And I try to make the best of those moments, the moments that I'm in. Annie Lennox.
Welcome back. This conversation is getting too good. We're just going on and on and on. And my next affirmation is, I listen with love to my body's messages.
Love that. That's fabulous.
Do you want to start?
Oh, absolutely. Our bodies always give us messages, whether we're tuned into them or not. That's what the key is. You know, when your body, just like pain anywhere in your body is letting you know something is out of balance, right?
Correct.
But what about those other things that your body says, like, oh, I feel a little bloated when I eat a certain food, or I feel a little out of balance when I talk to a certain person. Do you know, these are things that always, your body always responds, because we talked about this earlier, how thought has a lot to do with the chemical response in your body. So yes, your body has wonderful things to tell you at the same time, when it feels good, when it feels bad, when it's not feeling too good, but you got to pay attention to it.
And the smallest things. Ever since I was a little kid, I have a very strong connection with scent. And if I don't like the way a person smells, I can't get along with them.
No offense, but.
And it's not necessarily that it's an awful smell, but there are just certain people in life that
There's
there's this chemistry thing that goes on. And for example, I worked at a dance studio, and I just didn't like the way the lady smelled who owned the studio. And I had the most difficult time working with her. And bottom line is that she was not a genuine soul. And that's what my body told me first. So I think that whole scent thing was, I kind of clenched up every time she was around me, and it was like, something's wrong here, but my body was giving me this message. There's something wrong with this, with this relationship, with this connection, but I tried to intellectualize it instead of just allowing that gut feeling. This is what my gut tells me from the very beginning, and maybe moving on and maybe working somewhere else, which I probably wish I had done, in the long run, in the whole story. If I could tell you the whole story, I probably should have gone and done something else immediately. But my brain said, you can't just judge life by what your body tells you. With my hip replacement, I was still running 5 miles a day, coming home and putting heat patches on my hip, and my body was telling me something. But instead of listening to what it was telling me, I kept thinking, I can outsmart it. I can do better by it. And your body knows. Your body knows exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. And when you start to put your antenna up, when you start to listen to the whispers of your life, I think that's when your life starts to improve.
And one of the things that's so interesting, which is what the woman that created these cards came up with, was the metaphysical reasons for your body having different issues. And so when you think about a given condition in your body, it still somehow is manifested in the inner world and in your thought process first. Even though you don't want to believe it, even things like cancer, even things like fibroids, still, it resonates first with whether it's a resentment, something that's negative or derogatory or shame. When it builds in your system, remember, we're talking about that chemical reaction to words and thoughts, especially the thoughts, what you believe. So moving forward in life, you know, when your legs are starting to hurt or your knees start to hurt, at the same time, you're in this situation where you don't really want to move to the next level.
Right, exactly.
You know, so there's a connection there. And the more we can get that this is all connected, our spirits, our bodies, and our minds, and that the body is the representation of the other two things.
And when you ignore dis-ease in your body,
Absolutely.
you invite disease into your body.
Yeah.
And learning that, that's a tough lesson because
It's a tough lesson.
it's a tough one because we always think we know more, and our body knows more than we do.
Yes, indeed. Indeedy. So, let's see. Oh, sorry, do you want me? I can, okay. My motto this year is, I go for the joy. I love this. Life is here for me to enjoy today. That's joy, even the word, when you really, really think about what brings you joy, I can only smile. I begin to smile immediately, and my body feels good in that moment. It's just a feeling of, this is what makes me happy. This is what keeps me in this moment. So what is that joy for me right now? It's knowing that I have a place of gratitude and continuous blessings in my life that I'm always aware of. When I'm out of balance, I got to go find some joy, that even if it's a beautiful tree or a flower or looking at my cat sleep or playing or looking at my daughter, something that brings me immediate joy. My connection with the Creator always brings me a lot of joy. What about for you?
I am committed to noticing the joy in my life, in my everyday life. Not just in my dreams, not just in my goals, but in my everyday life. When I step out of my car and walk across the courtyard towards the apartment or the house and one of the neighbors says hello, I take the joy from that. When I walk to the mailbox and the neighbor who doesn't say hello, I don't allow them to take my joy away. And joy is your responsibility. When you get joy is my responsibility. It's my responsibility to notice, and then notice when someone tries to take your joy away. Because so many times, and we talked about the situation at the doctor's office, when I went to the doctor's office, and the lady, she was having a difficult time at the front desk with her copay, and she was aggravated, and she decided to turn around and lash out at me. If I would have turned right around and lashed back at her, I would have allowed her to take my joy away, which may have brought her a second of joy, but unnecessary and unwarranted joy. And so I've learned how to, instead of allowing other people to take my joy away, I try to share my joy with them. If the neighbor turns around and doesn't say hello, I'll say, well, it was really nice to see you, and smile.
That's a good follow-up.
Yeah. You know, and try to share my joy, because I think that joy is contagious. It's like laughing, it's like smiling. Whenever you say the word joy, you think laughter, you think smiling. They're all contagious. And if you can harness your joy, if you can know your joy, if you can believe your joy, then you can share your joy. And not a moment until you know what your joy is. When you know what is joyous in the world, what is joyous in life. That is the second, I think, that you start to change. Because the second that you can share your joy, you become joy. So.
I find that that place has to exist within yourself first in order for you to give outward, like anything else, like love. You know, joy, when you talk about neighbors, I have a neighbor that I don't care what their face looks like. I always say, good morning. You know, you can tell when they don't want to say anything. Good morning, how are you? Every time. I always tell my daughter to do the same, because I don't want to come down to that level. I don't want to be in that energy at all. You know, I want to keep that joy. But I see people all the time on the street. My husband used to say, you say hi to everybody, especially if they're not smiling.
Right, exactly.
You know, because smiling is contagious. And you don't know what people are going through. That could have been the bright spot of their day.
Yeah, and you never know that.
You just never know. They could have just heard some bad news and then, you know, like, hi, all smiles. And it's important to be that and to do that. If you have that joy, share it.
Yeah. When I first moved to Germany, one of the things I noticed is German people don't express their joy, or not freely. You know, they're not a really ha 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 group of people. And I was living and working in a health club, so I ate at the restaurant that was at the health club. My whole life was in this health club. And the people, when I first got there, everybody was really cool, and no one really talked to each other. But being myself, I talked to everyone, I told jokes, I became friends with the cook, so she knew exactly what I liked to eat, the waitress who brought me my food, and I had a wonderful experience. I was there for almost 2 years, and I literally lived upstairs in the health club. So, I mean, I rarely left the building. And I moved on and was on Facebook one day and ran into the waitress who worked in the restaurant. And she said, the halls of this building have never been the same without your laughter.
Wow, I know that warmed your heart.
Yeah, and I had never even considered it, but I took my laughter into the building, but what I noticed by the time I left, more people were laughing. So my joy was contagious.
It's a wonderful thing.
Well, how strange. My next affirmation, my mental pattern is positive and joyful.
Excellent.
I don't even have to reiterate, right? Absolutely. I think that's the state you have to stay in. That's my steady state. I always wake up in the morning and I think, what do I have to be thankful for? And I go to bed at the end of the night thinking of all of the things that I have to be thankful for at the end of the day. My friends. I live in this constant state of joy because I know who my friends are. I'd love being over 50 because when I was in my 20s and my 30s, I had a lot of fair-weathered friends, a lot of fake friends, a lot of people that I had to be around all the time. I had to be out all the time. I had to be around people all the time. But now, knowing who is my circle of concern, my absolute, the people who are always going to be there in my life. And knowing who they are, I've been able to relax. You know, I can say, you know, I don't need to be around you all the time to know that you love me.
Exactly.
Before, I always had to be in your face, and if you didn't respond and you weren't always with me, then you didn't love me enough. But now I know that I cannot see you 6 months, and the second that I see you, we fall right back into that same pattern of joy and love because that's what our relationship is.
It's based on.
And when you have enough of those relationships in your life, it's like, I'm okay. You know, I know exactly where to find joy when I need it. And I think that's an important thing, is to know where to find your joy.
It's true, your joy, and it's true about friends as well. I have friends all over the country, and there are specific people. We could see, it could be months, even years, that we don't see each other, and we talk to each other, and it's just like the chemistry is there, the click is there, and you may have changed, and I may have changed, but it's still the same. The authentic energy is there. You know, that bond is still there, and that's a beautiful thing.
I love friendship. I think that is one of the
It's
joys.
essential for the soul. That's what.
Really. And I've been able to cultivate wonderful friendships. I have, like you said, friends who I may not talk to all the time. I have a friend who I talk to every day. Sometimes I look at the phone, and it says we've been on the phone for 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Like, what are we talking about?
And what are we talking about? Well, we don't talk about anything really, but every single time we talk, I notice we're laughing. I mean, you could say I wrecked my car today, but by the end of the conversation, we're cracking up about it. And that is the reason why we stay on the phone so long, because it's just, we go shopping together, and she lives in Atlanta, so, you know, it's not like we're right next to each other, like we can go shopping, but she'll say, oh, I'm gonna go into the grocery store. I'll say, oh, go ahead, what you gonna get? And we'll just start talking about what she's buying in the grocery store and what she's gonna make for dinner, and the time just goes by, but it's just so joyful that it never makes me, I feel like I want to say, okay, I really need to go now, because sometimes we don't even speak for a minute or two. She might be trying on a pair of jeans, and I'll say, okay, I'll wait. But even in the waiting periods, when we're not saying anything, there's still joy on the line.
Yeah,
so joy is a wonderful thing, and finding your joy is absolutely necessary.
It's necessary.
Yeah.
It's absolutely necessary. You reminded me of a friend of mine that we used to have these conversations from 7:30 in the morning till like 2. I'm getting ready to eat. And hold on, you know, putting on the blender. Just give me a minute. And it's the same thing. It's like having that person there,
Right.
when they're not in the same state. You know, just talking and giggling. But that's excellent. And it makes you want to go out and look at the relationships that you have and nurture them.
And
You know?
realize that you don't have to have a million relationships.
Exactly.
I don't need to have a million friends because I have that core group of 30 people that I know will always be with me,
Yep.
that I can, and I know which friend to pull on for which thing.
Exactly.
You know, some friends you pull on when you need joy. Some people you want to talk to when you got a problem because they're full of answers.
Yeah.
I
Some
have,
people are spiritual. Some people you just need to, I know.
yeah. Yeah. Some people just
Beautiful.
like to complain. So I know that if I want to complain, I'll call this person because they get joy out of complaining. And just make it joyful. You know, you can complain and be joyous.
Exactly.
Because you can be complaining and still be joyful.
And turn it into laughter, like you
Right.
said.
Yeah.
You know, it eases makes it a little lighter, a little easier to bear when you have friends.
That's the key to living, is making it lighter.
And making the burdens lighter. I'm taking the next step for my healing. That's a really important one. Because as we talked about patterns, interrupting patterns, if people would realize that they have the power of their own healing right in their own hands and in their own minds, it would just be such an easier time with this whole Western medical, you know, you got to take this pill for that and that pill for this. When you begin with yourself and you do those self-assessments like we talked about earlier, you know, really you can go through every part of your body and just think about how much you really are in a place of gratitude about it. And then look at the things in your life that aren't working. What can you do to initiate the change, to bring about that balance? So if you know that you're your perfect healing, you know that everything that you have is already inside of you. Everything that you need, everything you want, it's already there. It's present.
I live my life through music. I always, ever since I was a
music's
little
wonderful.
kid, there were songs that were way over my head that I loved when I was a child, that I grew up later on in life and thought, wow, you know, how strange that I took to that song when I was 4 or 5 or 6 and didn't know what love was or didn't understand things. But later on in life, those lyrics, those words meant so much to me. And one of my very favorite songs is Love is the Healing.
Really?
Yeah, and I loved it when I was 10, 12 years old. Had no idea what the song meant.
Who is it by?
Roberta Flack.
Oh, okay. I love Roberta Flack.
Yeah, Blue Lights in the Basement is the name of the CD or album. Oops. I aged myself. It was an MP3 download. But the song just talks about how when you find love in your heart, love in yourself, that you could then begin to heal. When you find love, the healing begins. And yeah, love is the healing. When you start to love yourself,
Just love yourself.
you start
exactly.
healing immediately. The second that you say, I love myself, as long as you beat yourself up, as long as you don't acknowledge your magnificence, you are not healing, and you're working towards disease or illness. You're pushing yourself towards dis-ease and illness.
Being in balance, yes.
Finding the love in yourself, and then finding the love in the people who even disappoint you the most. Because there are people who you love, but they constantly disappoint you. But learning how to find the love and realizing that that love can help the whole situation heal. And then going in there and being proactive in the healing process. Because heal is an action word.
Absolutely.
It doesn't happen just because it happens. It happens because it's something that we're working on. Like
We're
our
consciously
goals,
working
like our
on it.
resolutions, we're consciously working on it. Then healing becomes so much greater. It happens so much quicker. It is miraculous when we focus. Anything you focus on. And I was
Expands.
listening to something the other day, and a guy said that he bought a car that he loved. And he said before he bought the car, he never noticed it. But after he got the car and fell in love with it, it was constantly on his mind, and he started seeing that car everywhere he went. And he thought to himself, did everyone always have this car, or am I just starting to notice? But when you do start to heal, when you actually really find love and healing within yourself, you start finding it everywhere. You start everywhere you look, it's like, oh, look, love and healing, peace and happiness, because it's what you're focused on.
Yeah, it's just what you're attracting, you know, and you're giving your attention. Anything you give your attention to grows. And I find that happens so often when someone brings something to your attention and you never thought about before, and all of a sudden you see it everywhere from that point on. And so I would say that this healing that takes place, it can happen at every moment, every day. When you say I love me, you know, when you look in the mirror and you say I love me, when you begin to find that joy, that's healing. Do you know, those little things that just we even take for granted are healings. Like, for instance, having a conversation with a good friend that you might not have, this might have been one of your friends you didn't mean to call to get a healing from, but there might be something, some nugget, some golden nugget in there that they say to you in that conversation that helps you heal something. And you may not know till after the conversation's over. So there's always space for healing, especially self-healing, because that's where it begins.
Well, we're going to end this segment just simply saying love is the healing. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Alexis, for being here.
You're very welcome.
And we have to come back again and talk about our resolutions, because
Exactly.
we've talked quite a while. It's always a pleasure, always wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Magnificent Living Today.